Long story short, they came in, had us escorted off the property, was going to take over the business. In 3 days, we had the ability to go back in. We borrowed a bunch of money from charity's dad to pay a lawyer.
The same year Dave Kindig won the biggest award of his career, over 30 people accused him of fraud. For years, Kindig-It Design's flawless restorations and bold custom builds made Dave one of the most respected names in the custom car world. Then, the lawsuits began to pile up. The TV show went dark, and questions started following him the way his craftsmanship never had to before. So, what really happened behind the scenes? Join us as we uncover what really happened to Dave Kindig. The beginning nobody was watching. Long before there were cameras, lawsuits, or a name people knew, there was just a kid in Salt Lake City, Utah, who couldn't walk by anything without taking it apart first. Dave grew up in a household that valued discipline and hands-on skill, and from an early age, toy cars, Lego sets, and sketches scribbled in the margins of his schoolwork all pointed toward the same obsession. His grandfather, a metalworker by trade, taught him how to shape metal with his own hands, a skill that would quietly become the foundation of everything that followed. By his teens, that fascination had taken on a purpose, and he started customizing his own rides instead of just admiring other people's. After finishing school, Dave did not walk straight into the custom car world the way people might assume from watching him on television years later. Instead, he spent 8 years working for a company called High Performance Coatings, learning the unglamorous fundamentals of finishes, materials, and restoration work, while the job sent him traveling across the country and putting him in rooms with established builders long before he had any name of his own. It wasn't flashy, and it was nothing like fans would later see on screen, but it gave him the technical foundation that a future business would eventually come to rely on completely. Then, in June of 1999, Dave made a decision that could have ended in disaster just as easily as it ended in success. He quit his stable job, took out his retirement savings for about $4,800, and used that small amount to start his own company with his wife, Charity, in a rented 4,500 square foot space. There was no safety net beneath either of them. Charity believed in the idea even after Dave later admitted he had his own doubts, and her encouragement became one of the deciding factors in whether the leap happened at all. The first major project to get noticed was about as unlikely as it gets, but in those early days, survival depended on getting work that would actually get noticed. A manufacturer of underwear had a PT Cruiser customized, and Dave hand-painted the whole car with prints taken right from the company's designs. It was such a bold move that the local papers picked up the story almost immediately. Demand had grown so great within 2 years that a move was made to a larger 9,000 square foot space, and the grand reopening of that new store coincided with the September 11, 2001 attacks, thus tying a business milestone to one of the darkest days in modern American history. Dave's work became known throughout Utah, and the shop grew to a 27,000 square foot facility with a 10,000 square foot warehouse and a growing team of fabricators, painters, and designers. What began as a husband and wife operation in a rented space grew into a serious regional player, and that reputation eventually caught the eye of producers from the Velocity Network, later rebranded as Motor Trend Network. They wanted a sample video that showed how the shop really worked, and Dave shot it exactly as it was, not rigging anything for the cameras. That honesty led directly to a television deal, and in September of 2014, Bitchin Rides premiered, eventually running for 11 seasons and featuring about 300 custom vehicles revived inside his shop. The show made a small Utah shop a household name almost overnight, but the kind of attention that comes with national television doesn't just stop at admiration. It invites scrutiny too, And the first trial of that scrutiny had already quietly begun in a courtroom most fans would never hear about. The lawsuit nobody talked about. In 2015, 2 years before chiropractors and fraud allegations were ever on the scene, Dave's company sued a Michigan-based business called Creative Controls in the District Court of Utah for using Kindig-It's patented inventions and copyrighted designs without permission. This was not a dispute over a half-finished project or an unhappy customer. It was a war for ownership and originality, the kind of legal battle that custom car builders rarely talk about publicly, but which can make the difference between success and failure, because the worth of an entire shop depends on signature looks and inventive engineering that nobody else can just steal. Creative Controls fought hard back, arguing that the Utah court had no power to even hear the case, since the company had no offices, employees, or regular presence in the state. Dave's legal team took a different position, pointing to a website that took orders from Utah residents, a prior donation of a custom parking brake to the shop, one confirmed sale to a Utah customer, and an allegation that Creative Controls had used photos directly from Kindig-It's own website. In January 2016, the court issued a split decision, permitting certain non-patent claims to proceed, but dismissing the patent claims for lack of jurisdiction. The back and forth went on for another year, with Dave's team trying without success to move more evidence, a move the court refused as both untimely and needless. Both sides met with a magistrate judge in hopes of settling, but no agreement was reached by the summer of 2017. The case finally ended in July of that year, when both sides filed a joint dismissal, ending the dispute for good, though the actual terms were never disclosed. It was, in the end, a contained battle. Two companies, a narrow legal question, and a resolution that allowed everyone involved to walk away without their name attached to anything dramatic. Almost no one outside the custom car world ever heard of it. And for a few years afterwards, Dave's legal history seemed more like a closed chapter than a pattern. Nor would that impression survive what came next. The promise worth $670,000. In 2019, a group of more than 30 chiropractors and wellness professionals from all over the United States pooled their money together to commission a full custom restoration of a 1974 Dodge Charger. The agreed price for the build was $670,000, and the group paid over $230,000 up front to get the project underway. The word was that for that kind of money, the investor wanted regular communication, visible progress, and a finished product that reflected the reputation Dave had spent years building on national television. That expectation crumbled as the months turned into years. By the time the group hit a breaking point, later legal filings say all that was left of their Dodge Charger was a stripped-down shell, with no completed drivetrain, no interior, and no functional systems of any kind installed. Requests for updates were reportedly met with vague reassurances or ignored outright. Kindig-It Design said it was under increasing pressure and cited some real circumstances, including the widespread disruptions caused by the pandemic, such as supply shortages and shipping delays that slowed production across the entire restoration industry during that time. Their defense was that the project had never been abandoned, and the delays were the inevitable product of external forces beyond their control. Some observers found that explanation very convincing. An industry-wide excuse did little to explain years of silence and a project that had barely moved past demolition, to the clients waiting on their car. Before things escalated further, both sides attempted to resolve the dispute quietly through private mediation, a detail that rarely makes headlines but speaks to how badly each side wanted to avoid what came next. That mediation failed, apparently over differences on refunds and what each side thought they were owed. When no resolution was forthcoming, the group sued in 2022, naming Kindig-It Design and Dave, personally, as defendants in a suit alleging fraud, breach of contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The complaint said the company had continued to take payments long after it became clear the project could not realistically be completed on the timeline it had promised. After news of the lawsuit went public, several former clients have come forward with similar experiences and many of the same complaints. A customer said he waited more than 3 years for a Camaro restoration that he was told involved nothing more than basic bodywork. Others reported long waits, difficulty reaching anyone at the shop, and difficulty getting refunds on projects that had totally stalled. Individually, none of the other complaints led to additional lawsuits, but collectively, they raised the broader question of whether Kindig-It Design had simply taken on more work than it could actually handle. As of late 2025, the case is still ongoing, with both sides exchanging documents and taking depositions during discovery, and a possible trial looming in early 2026. What made the timing even tougher to break down is that this same lawsuit was playing out in the background during one of the proudest moments of Dave's entire career, a moment that would require fans to hold two completely different versions of Dave in their heads at the same time. The trophy that arrived in the middle of the storm, the Don Riddler Memorial Award, often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Hot Rodding, is awarded at the Detroit Autorama to the single best new custom car introduced each year, and is one of the two most prestigious awards in the whole custom car world. Dave had gotten to the last round of contenders at the event before, but never won the top prize. That changed in 2024 when a heavily reimagined 1953 Corvette Tribute called 12 Air, built from the ground up with a custom V12 engine, finally got him the win and a $10,000 prize. What the fans didn't know then was how long that car had been in the works, in secret. To avoid disqualification under Riddler rules, the team built a secret room inside the shop and kept the project hidden from everyone, including the Bitchin Rides film crew, for nearly 5 years. Each panel was hand-shaped from sheet aluminum using traditional English wheelwork, and not a single part was lifted from a real 1953 Corvette. The chassis itself was built from aircraft-grade aluminum in a monocoque design that drew engineering inspiration from Formula One and IndyCar suspension geometry. The car was named after its best-kept secret, a custom 9.2-liter V12 built on an LS-based architecture, making about 650 horsepower, and engineered such that the engine itself was a load-bearing structural element of the chassis, not just sitting on top of it. Inside, the dash and console were fully 3D printed and covered in sienna leather. The finished body was painted in a custom infrared paint with bronze accents that made it impossible to miss on a show floor crowded with competitors. Winning the Riddler the first time it was shown publicly was just the start. 12 Air went on to win nearly a dozen more awards that same year at events all over the country, from the World of Wheels Autorama circuit to the Triple Crown of Rodding, making what was a 5-year secret obsession the most decorated build in Dave's career. It was the kind of validation years of television fame alone could never fully deliver. Proof from his own industry peers that the craftsmanship still mattered more than anything going on in a courtroom. That year, the timing made it almost impossible to separate the two parts of his story. The same builder who was being praised as the best in his industry was simultaneously being sued in court for taking money and not delivering the work he promised. In a curious way, clients waiting on a stripped-down Dodge Charger and fans cheering for the Riddler win were describing the same man from two different vantage points. That contradiction was still unresolved when a second piece of news arrived. which would pose a completely different question. Was the empire built around Dave's name beginning to fall apart at the same time that it was being celebrated? The announcement nobody wanted to read. On November 1st, 2024, Dave published a message on Facebook, confirming that Bitchin Rides would be coming to an end after its 11th season. The announcement was a real shock for longtime viewers of a show that had been on the air for over a decade and defined a whole era of automotive reality television. The message from Dave was one of appreciation, thanking fans for their support over the years and reaffirming his commitment to continuing custom design work regardless of what happened with the show. But the timing did raise an obvious question. With a high-profile fraud lawsuit coming so closely behind, many viewers couldn't help but wonder whether the legal trouble had anything to do with the decision, even as the explanations being offered pointed in a very different direction altogether. Industry observers say the canceling had more to do with the television business itself than with anything going on inside Dave's shop. Discovery shut down the Motor Trend Plus streaming service in early 2024 amid a wider corporate restructuring in connection with its merger with Warner Media, folding many of its shows into Discovery Plus and Max, as well as changing the way its content was produced and financed. But higher production costs and a glut of rival custom car shows hitting the market in recent years made it increasingly difficult to justify continuing a series that had been running for more than a decade. The final season began airing on March 12, 2025, concluding an 11-season run and well over 150 episodes. For Dave, it meant losing the platform that had introduced him to millions of viewers. What it did not mean was the end of his name in the industry, the end of the lawsuit still trailing behind him, or the end of the question that fans, clients, and competitors alike were all asking at the same time: what happens to a builder when the cameras that made him famous are no longer there to soften the picture? The answer, it seemed, had been quietly taking shape for years: the empire after the cameras. While Bitchin Rides was still airing, Dave had been working towards something fans barely noticed amid the drama of the show: an actual manufacturer's license. In 2023, Kindig-It Design officially secured that license, making a lifelong dream into something real: the ability to design, build, and sell its own production car instead of just customizing vehicles that already belong to somebody else. The result was the CF1, a ground-up turnkey tribute to the 1953 Corvette, with a carbon fiber body that had no panels in common with the original car, and a purpose-built chassis engineered specifically for it. What started as a single roadster concept at the 2021 SEMA show grew into a full range, including a convertible cabriolet and later fastback coupe, with prices ranging from around $375,000 to nearly $550,000 depending on setup. By the time industry podcasts were checking in on the program, more than 30 CF1s had already been sold, with new builds still working their way through the shop months out. The pivot didn't end with building cars. In January 2026, Kindig-It launched a new YouTube channel, Kindig All Access, a deliberate shift away from the shortened, highly edited format that television had always required. Instead of jamming a whole build into one episode, the channel put out weekly installments that took their time with individual details: a single body line, a single fabricated bracket, the kind of unhurried craftsmanship that a cable network's time constraints had never allowed. At the same time, the company expanded into its own apparel and parts brand, kept a steady presence on the SEMA show floor, and built out a touring schedule for the summer of 2026 that put the shop's cars in front of crowds without needing a network's permission to do it. It was an answer to the question the cancellation had posed, in a way. Dave's career didn't end when he lost a TV deal. It just made the business stand on its own, selling cars and content directly to the people who wanted them anyway. But that growth was happening on a parallel track to a courtroom that had gone nowhere. The chiropractors were still waiting on their Dodge Charger. The case was still in discovery, and a trial date was still on schedule for early 2026. Whatever the verdict, that trial will be about more than the dispute over one stalled car. It will determine which Dave Kindig the public will remember, the builder who parlayed a $4,800 gamble into a manufacturer's license and a $650,000 car line, or the one a group of clients claim took their money and gave them a shell. Do you think Dave Kindig was truly buried by pandemic delays, or did Kindig-It Design just take on more than it could ever deliver? And after all that has transpired, would you trust him with a six-figure build today? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.